Away two. Viva the AC Youth League, the AC Youth League, viva! Viva the AC Youth League, the AC Youth League, viva! Uzoyithola kanjani? Hlele khoneni. Uzoyithola kanjani? Viva the AC, viva! Viva the AC, viva! Thank you very much, Deputy President. The first female Deputy President of the ANC Youth League. The first female Deputy President of the ANC Youth League. Comrade Phumzile, who is also deployed as the Deputy Minister of Mineral Resources in South Africa. Greetings to the leadership of the Youth League, the Secretary General of the Youth League, the Deputy Secretaries Generals of the Youth League, the TG of the Youth League, the NEC of the ANC Youth League. Most importantly, great former leaders of the ANC Youth League. Comrades, we are blessed to have former leaders of the ANC Youth League with us here. We have the former Deputy President of the ANC Youth League, because that other one left. He gave himself a status of the only president left of that generation. Now he is the president of the ANC Youth League of that generation. Comrade Andle Lungisa, the Secretary General of the ANC Youth League, Comrade Njabulo Nzuza, who happens also to be deployed as a Deputy Minister of Home Affairs. Manfuda ma passport na ma ID akhona la. Mane issues ama illegal foreigners. Na ngumuntu ama illegal foreigners la. Uzawalungisa. Is a deployee of the Youth League. Then we greet, in the history of the Youth League, there is only 2 Collens that became president. And they were following each other. It was an era of Collens. Kina koyabo Collen. To greet the former president of the Youth League, who happens to be deployed also as a deputy speaker in the Northwest, Comrade Collen Maina. Then greet the former president of COSAS. I think it's only me and him and the other one that left that became both presidents of COSAS and the ANC Youth League. I know there are a conference demon, different organizations. Now President Lulu Johnson is a former president of COSAS and also a former deputy president of the Youth League and a former president of the Youth League. Then greet the organizations that the DP has acknowledged from our neighboring countries, and greet all former leaders of the Youth League that are here, which are not written here on the list that I'm given by the DP. But most importantly, comrades, greet the chairperson of the ANC in the Northern Cape. When we're crying for help to convene an historic second NGC of the ANC Youth League, he did not tell us stories. He said, come to the Northern Cape, I'll make sure that you have a progressive conference, progressive NGC of the ANC Youth League. And that's why we're here. In absentia, greet the former chair of Gauteng, former TG of the ANC, current deputy president of the ANC and the country, Comrade Paul Mashatile, COSAS, SASCO, the YCL, the Women's League, the Veterans League, the War Veterans, delegation from business. You are welcome. Comrades, when we decided as the National Executive Committee to convene the second General Council of the Youth League, we were inspired by different generations. We were inspired by the generation of Comrade Lou Johnson that declared freedom or death when they were fighting against an oppressive system of apartheid that makes sure that it takes away the dignity of black people and majority of South Africans. We later inspired by the Veterans League of the ANC. Due to problems that are faced by the ANC, they took a decision that if the ANC does not renew itself, it's going to die. They also adopted a slogan similar to the generation that fought for freedom. They said, renewal or death. Then as the Youth League, we made a very clear decision that as long as we're still dispositioned from economic activities of the country, we are dead. Then we adopted a theme for this NGC called economic freedom or death. Because the economy is in the center of all our problems. The generation that fought for freedom achieved political freedom. Our generation is called upon to renew the ANC, but also to fight for economic freedom for our people who are still dispositioned from their own economic activities 31 years later. I've requested the SG to summarize, but my SG refused. Said that for the first time, Comrade Venus, chair of the Northern Cape, I must read word per word. Because a political report sets the political agenda for the ANC Youth League. I was telling the former GP of the Youth League, Comrade Lungisa, that I prefer closing remarks because that is where I'm able to be myself. The beauty about this political report is that I am not going to be made to apologize. The last time I made a political statement, I was made to apologize, and the whole NEC ran away. Now this one is their political report. If I'm to apologize, I'll call a press briefing with the whole NEC will apologize collectively. Comrades, we meet here today since the formation of the Youth League today. 10 September 1944, 81 years later, today, the organization that has brought us here was formed. In 1944, young African people converged from all parts of South Africa, coming from countrysides, towns, villages, and cities. They were working youth, unemployed youth, student youth, intellectual youth, united to reclaim the birthright of fearless African youth, converged on the day to fight against imperialism and to fight for the struggle of our people. They came to perform a great and radical act to reaffirm the ANC Youth League as an historic mission. This aligns from the Frantz Fanon assertion that every generation, out of relative obstacles, must discover its mission, fulfill it, or betray it. When we are comfortable with the status quo, nothing transforms. Marxist also teaches us, through laws of dialectics and historical materialism, that change is the only constant variable for nature. The National General Council of the ANC Youth League is now in session. It is in session to discuss, review, revise, reaffirm the many organizational, political, and ideological resolutions, and positions which took the ANC Youth League, which were took at the ANC Youth League 26th National Conference. The ANC Youth League National General Council functioned as an organizational foremost political school and are deliberate to provide delegates with valuable insight into the League's history and character and growth. The National General Council convenes immediately after the Women's Month, a period in which we honor the historic and the ongoing contribution of women into the liberation of our people. Their courage and sacrifice against colonization and apartheid continue to inspire our struggle for the full emancipation of the historical oppressed masses. The NGC takes place under a new and difficult political condition. It is for the first time the NGC of the ANC Youth League held at a time where the ANC no longer commands full political authority. Following the decline of support from 57% to 40%. This outcome is not merely a stats, it's a representation of profound political shift of our society. As the Youth League, we bear responsibility to confront these realities, to fight boldly and analyze the current balance of forces, and to chant a bold cause that will restore the confidence of our movement and ensure the continued leadership of the ANC in the struggle for social transformation. Ours as a generation is called to lead at a time when the influence of the ANC has declined. We're a generation tasked with the leadership at a time when it is not all glory. Let me remind you about the decline of the ANC. The decline of the ANC is a total suspension of the revolution in areas where we're totally out of power. Because our program of action is the National Democratic Revolution. And the ANC has identified the state as a vehicle to advance that revolution. Now the question is, in areas where the ANC is not the drivers of the state, is the revolution not suspended in those areas? Which is the program that we've agreed upon, which is the National Democratic Revolution. The voters have communicated that this reflection with the slow pace of transformation, prosperous democracy, non-sexist and non-racial society, which is better for all, as outlined in the NTR. If we are not vigilant and intentional, our NTR, if we are not vigilant and intentional, our proud liberation movement will be liquidated. Our proud liberation movement will be liquidated into an historic by counter-revolution forces. As the president of the Youth League, I must be frank. We need a National Executive Committee that has a revolutionary consciousness. We must have a political clarity to distinguish between a friend and an enemy, between a genuine revolutionary and an opportunist. Mainly because opportunists want to use the ANC for personal gain. The government of national unity has unmasked many. It has revealed who is truly rooted in revolutionary principles and who is here only for the spoils of offices. The MK party and the EFF alliances has pushed us into a new hostile terrain, while the DA parades itself as a so-called strategic partners as a tool to weaken our movement from within. Wake up, comrades. Wake up. This is the political reality before us. The Youth League must rise to the challenge, not as a passive observer, but as a militant vanguard, jealously safeguarding the ANC historic mission. Jealously safeguarding the ANC historic mission. The ANC historic mission of the liberation of transformation. I dare say, dear comrades, this is our moment. The ANC decline is not just a crisis. It is an opportunity for the youth to reclaim the revolution and guide it towards an historic mission that suggests that we must fight for our people. Let me be clear. We will never achieve the revolutionary consciousness without political education. You can be an engineer, a doctor, a nurse, a business person, but if you do not invest in political development, you will never be a true revolutionary. You will be no different from professionals serving in neoliberal structures. You will remain part of the system, not part of the revolution. In the process of redefining ourselves to save the liberation movement, we must borrow from Chairman Mao when he said, I quote, an ideology who gives an ideology when he says in his teaching and his ideologies and make fundamental demands and define it as who we are. Our words of action, our words and action must unite, not divide the people. They must benefit, not harm socialist transformation. They must consolidate, not weaken the people's democratic dictatorship. They must strengthen, not undermine democratic centralism. They must uphold, not discard the leadership of the party. They must promote, not harm international socialist unity and peace. I repeat, our words and action must unite, not divide the people. They must benefit, not harm socialist transformation. They must consolidate, not weaken the people's democratic dictatorship. They must strengthen, not undermine democratic centralism. They must uphold, not discard, the leadership of the party. They must promote, not harm, socialist unity and peace. Those are lessons we learn from. Speaking out of contradictions without political education and revolutionary consciousness is impossible. Without political education, revolutionary consciousness is impossible. You may carry the title of being a professional, but not be grounded yourself in political education. You'll never rise beyond the role. As the NGC says, the global economic order has been reshaped by the Americans' trade strategy. On one hand, was sweeping new tariff regimes imposed on the 7th of August has targeted over 90 economies, including allies like European Union, Japan, regional partners such as Lesotho, Zimbabwe, and Brazil. On the other hand, the United States has opted for a strategic caution in the dealing with the People's Republic of China by extending and negotiations and suspending further tariffs until November 2025. Washington has acknowledged that China is a formidable force and an expanding influence on global stage. This is not a small issue. It is a signal that the balance of power is shifting, that even the United States cannot afford to move recklessly against Beijing. Even the United States cannot move recklessly against Beijing because of the balance of power. As President Putin of Russia and President Jinping of China have openly declared that the world is undergoing a transformation unlike any other seen in the past 100 years. They have positioned themselves as not passive actors, but as architects of this change, advancing an ideological and political alternative to the hegemony of Western liberal capitalism. For South Africa, the question is urgent. What is our role in this new order? As the most industrialized economy on the African continent, as a member of the BRICS, we cannot afford to remain bystanders. Our foreign policy must evolve into a grand strategy, one that recognizes where China and even Northern Korea are steering the world. Position ourselves to contribute actively to the ideology and political realignment. The current rearrangement of the global trade underscores this point. While the United States has increased tariffs on partners such as Brazil, may soon extend them to India, and it has been forced into compromises with China. The National General Council must rise to the occasion, set the right tone for global politics. The role of the youth cannot be an afterthought. It must be spearheaded by the youth. We cannot be spectators of history. We ought to be makers of it. We cannot be spectators of history. We ought to be makers of it. The balance of global power is shifting, as it did during the Cold War. But this time, Africa must refuse to be a pawn on the chessboard of foreign empires. The balance of forces globally are shifting, as it did during World War. But this time, Africa must refuse to be a pawn on the chessboard of foreign empires. I make that emphasis. From 1977 to 1981, under the Carter administration, the ideological fault lines of the world were drawn. Today we face the same contradictions, but Africa is no longer weak and silent in the shadows of colonization. Africa rising with a collective GDP of 2.2 trillion, with over 1 billion people whose numbers will swell in 2035, with an emerging middle class of over 40 million. Our continent is not peripheral force. It is a decisive terrain upon which the future of global politics will be written. The question is not whether Africa will be involved, but whether will we lead with a revolutionary clarity and allow ourselves to be shrink once more into imperialist desires. The question is not whether Africa will be involved, but whether we will lead with a revolutionary clarity or allow ourselves to be shrinked once more into imperialist design. This NGC must proclaim boldly the youth of South Africa will not bow to the West. This NGC must proclaim boldly the youth of South Africa will not bow to the West. We will not accept sanctions. We will not accept sanctions. We will not accept lies. We will stand with the global South, with the BRICS, with all those who seek a world beyond the strangling of imperialism. Imperialism remains our enemy, as declared by the Green Book of 1979. I stand here as a child of the movement with an appreciation of the journey of the ANC has traveled post-1994. The democratic dispensation and the consciousness of, and conscious of the achievements we've made and our unwavering commitment to the revolutionary path. We carry forward the uncompromising spirit of Anton Lembete, A.P. Mda, Nkolisi Majobovu, Godfrey Picha, Robert Rasha, Patrick, and other giants who fought for the ANC Youth League, and had they lived longer, they would have stood at the same forefront of our liberation struggle, striking against the chains of racial oppression with even greater force. History is clear. It took the Youth League less than 5 years to shake the African National Congress and radicalize it into a mass fighting force of freedom. In those formative years in the 40s, the Youth League forced the ANC to abandon timed appeals instead of embracing bold, radical, and confrontational programs. From the moment the ANC was no longer merely a political organization, it became a weapon in the hands of the oppressed majority. A vehicle for the masses mobilizing against the twin evils of racial separation and economic exploitation. The turning point came with the ANC Youth League in 1949. The turning point came with the 1949 ANC conference, where the ANC Youth League influence was undeniable. A young and relatively inexperienced leadership was elected. J.S. Moroka, the new of the ANC as a president. Walter Sisulu, just 37 years old, as the Secretary General. This was not a compromise. It was a revolutionary necessity. The old guard were cautioned, and they could not adopt the military program. And the youth forced the ANC to adopt its program of action. Because the role of the Youth League is to a body of opinion in the African National Congress. In 1949 program of action, the Defiance campaign was one of the most militant and successful mass struggles in history of the ANC. This campaign unleashed a nationwide siege for the freedom of the people. Mere 7,000 members and over 100,000 members. For the first time, the ANC was not just an organization of elites, but a true national movement of the people. The Defiance campaign militancy inspired the formation of the Colored People's Congress, the Congress of Democrats, and laying a foundation for the Great Congress Alliance, a united front of the oppressed that would confront the apartheid regime, a mass-based resistance. Yet today, comrades, we are facing a sobering reality. The ANC membership has declined. Not only numbers, but in revolutionary quality. The ANC membership has declined. Not only numbers, but in revolutionary quality. The greater reservoir of militant cadres who once carried the ANC forward is drying out. Too often, membership has been reduced to stats, a head count to sway conferences in halls, while the deeper task of political education and ideological formation has been neglected. The quantity must therefore be crucible in which quality is forged. A large number of transformed into a disciplined revolutionary forces serving our people, guided by the attained economic freedom. Every new member must not remain a passive participant, but must consciously be molded into a cadre educated of political economy, organized in collective struggle, and armed with unshakable ideological clarity. Only through this process can the ANC transact the limitation of being a mere electoral vehicle and reclaim its historic position as a true vanguard of the oppressed. It must once again become the spearheaded of the masses, waging a reckless struggle against exploitation, inequalities, imperialist domination. In doing so, the ANC will not only revive its revolutionary character, but it will also charter a decisive path towards completing the liberation of our people. The construction of the economic injustice and the attainment of a genuine sovereignty and a free of dictatorship of capitalism and the chains of neocolonization. The decline of the ANC in 2004 has been diagnosed through various lenses, including social and economic factors. Yet the central and most pressing issue is the alienation of South African youth. Increasingly young people are struggling to identify with the ANC, not only politically, but culturally and socially. In losing the youth, the ANC has also lost the pathways to unity. The rebuilding of these pathways required a more numerous growth and demands a qualitative transformation where the lost youth of the ANC must be conscientized and organized and won back into the movement. To do this, we must approach our realities through the lens of materialism as a scientific method of understanding society. As Marxists reminded us that philosophers have only interpreted that it will be in various ways. The point, however, is to change it. The first ANC Youth League, NGC, fulfilled its historic duty by interpreting to the world that the task ahead is for economic freedom. I must keep here, I'll take forever. The National General Council discussion document on economic transformation makes it clear if the economy of South Africa it is not fundamentally transformed, the social crisis will deepen. If left unshaken, this will cripple to the economy itself, with an unintended, inevitable consequence of crime, violence, and hunger. True liberation requires more than ending national oppression. It demands the end of class oppression. Because you can vote for 30 years and remain poor if the economy is not radically transformed. You can vote for 30 years and remain poor if the economy is not radically transformed. The ANC succeeded in breaking the chains of racial domination, but history now calls on us to break the chain of economic boundaries that continues to reproduce inequality in our society. Since 1994, the progress has been made. South African black middle class has surpassed the white middle class. Today, more than 5 million black South Africans form part of this strata, a historical achievement driven by the ANC commitment for upliftment of a historic oppression. The new class has not only reshaped South African economy, but also transformed society's economy, but also transformed for social fiber. These political and economic strands cannot be dismissed. They must be acknowledged as part of the revolutionary acknowledgement, as part of the revolutionary gains of our movement. Yet, comrades, we stand at crossroads. The National Democratic Revolution, the strategic vision that has guided our struggle since the inception, the new phase most decisive test. The NDR's first theorized within the Communist Party, enriched by the Soviet Marxist-Leninism, was never merely an intellectual exercise. It was born out of material necessity, recognition of colonial and semi-colonials, where the working class were numerically weakened. Progress of social revolution required leadership by liberation movements such as the ANC. Now South Africa, in the NTR must move decisively from the liberation from the national liberation to the working class emancipation. It must retreat. It must risk the reversal of gains of 1994. It must never allow neoliberalism and counter-revolution elites to hijack the revolution. We must advance. We can forge a new epoch where economic power is not just for political power. It is transferred into the hands of the people. The task of generations is clear, is to defend and advance the NTR and deepen economic transformation. Ensure that liberation struggle moves beyond the end of apartheid, but into a full emancipation of our people from capitalism grips. The question remains unresolved. If the workers overthrow capitalism, they can create socialism. But when national liberation movement overthrow colonialism, what does it build? The ANC stands at crossroads. It is a historic. The ANC today stands at crossroads. Its historic majority is eroding. The base is fractured. Trust is crippling. For the good reason. The people have made it clear they will not support a corrupt, compromised, incompetent leaders that lack integrity and only to slogans. It is the foundation of the mass. It is this foundation of the mass confidence. Without it, we cannot claim to lead the people's movement. To rebuild that trust, we must patch the road. To rebuild that trust, we must patch the road. We must elevate leaders of unshakable principle and of unshakable principle with clear revolutionary vision. But even integrity alone, it is not enough. We must act. We must implement our historic resolutions. We must begin with the Freedom Charter as a revolutionary program of the Congress of South African People in 1955, adopted by the ANC in 1956. The Charter was never a patchwork of reforms. It was a radical call to remake South Africa and society from the ground. Nelson Mandela, as a volunteer-in-chief, Walter Sisulu, as Secretary General, helped to anchor the vision that it remains the North of the Star. The struggle is far from being over. We must be decisive ourselves. We cannot amass the battle for the political direction of this country. The strategy and tactic. It was only 1969 in the Alliance and the ANC National Consultative Conference in Morocco, in Tanzania, that a document, a strategy and tactic, was adopted. This was aimed at decolonization of the most African national states and rising strength of socialist and anti-colonial forces worldwide. Recognizing, somewhat inspired by those regions and global realities in a strategy and tactic, the ANC started by observing that the struggle of the oppressed, of the people of South Africa, is taking a pace within the international context of transition to a socialist system. Of the breakdown of the colonial system as a result of a national liberation and socialist and revolutionaries to fight against social and economic progress by the people in the whole world. The National Democratic Revolution. The NTR process of a struggle that aims to transfer power to the people. Power relates to political, economic, and economic issues. The objective of the NTR is to build a truly united, democratic, prosperous South Africa, in which the values of all citizens are measured by their humanity, without regard to race, gender, and social status. The ANC sets for goals to face the NTR, contains in the strategy of tactics. Economic freedom and social change now, not later. The economic freedom and social transformation must be fought for now, not deferred to some distant future. The economic freedom and social transformation must be fought now, not deferred to some distant future. This agency must also be rooted in the strategy and tactics of the ANC and the movement as a founding objective of the National Democratic Revolution. As the ANC Youth League, our historic responsibility is to align with the interests and the struggles of South African youth, with the strategy of the NTR. Our choices of the Youth League cannot exist outside the lived realities of the youth. South Africans, we are not only debating society, we are Africans. We have a revolutionary foundation responsibility to fight for the masses of our people. We must return to the core strategy of the objective of the NTR, as reaffirmed in the ANC 1997 strategy and tactics, that the creation of unity, non-racial, non-sexist, and democratic society, which means that the liberation of Africans in particular, and blacks in general, from political and economic bondages. This is not simply a political inspiration. It is a demand for structural transformation, an end to class exploitation, a non-racial economy, fight against inequalities and gender oppression. Yet, 31 years later into democracy, the material results of the struggle remains patchy. We must measure the success of the National Democratic Revolution not by symbolic representation of access to votes, but by the transformation of power relations. Who owns, who controls, and who benefits? Yes, there have been gains, as we account, in which I can characterize as transitional gains for the part of achievement. In 1994, only 34% of households had access to electricity. Today, 94% do have access. The murder rate has also declined. But the economic terrain, where the real power resides, we have failed. We have failed to break back the apartheid capitalist system. The top of the 0.1 of the economy is still in the hands of the few. Our economy, the way it's structured, it is no longer sustainable. When majority are dispositioned from their own economic activities, dependent on the minorities. We made various calls as the ANC Youth League that the only way to resolve the issue of the economic inequalities is also to introduce export quotas. We've made a call as the Youth League that the other way to resolve the issue of unemployment is to resolve the issue of export quotas. We're saying that a continent like ours, a country like ours, a province like the Northern Cape, with very rich critical minerals, cannot have unemployed youth. We've made a call as the Youth League that not more than 70% of raw critical minerals must leave this country. We're saying they must remain here and beneficiated here to industrialize our economy, to create enough economic opportunities for the youth and create enough employment for the youth of South Africa. We're saying that we cannot accept the high level of unemployment when we're a blessed nation with so many raw minerals. We're saying that we're not a generation of cowards. We're a generation that will fight for the total liberation of our people. We're not a generation that will starve in poverty on the land of cream and honey. We're not, Comrade Zamane, ANC leadership, we're not a generation of cowards. No one can explain why blacks are still poor in South Africa 31 years later. No one can explain why we're still dispositioned from our own economic opportunities 21 years later. No one can explain why rail networks are sold every day to private partnership at the expense of our people. The days of selling out are over. Mokete wa dikatsi le dikatsinyana o fedile. We've made a point, Comrade Zamane, that selling of rail is selling the security of the country. A rail is a security matter. It is not just an economic matter. And we have acknowledged, Comrade Zamane and the NEC, that rail infrastructure is deliberately disfunded so that it's exposed and be sold. Because it's under budgeted, so it does not perform. And we've acknowledged, Comrade Zamane, that there's no way we'll industrialize the economy and beneficiate our raw materials here if the rail networks are collapsed and are in private hands. Now, anyone that sells rail is the same person who's dispositioning black majorities from the economy of the country. If we allow rail to be sold, we're saying that we must remain poorer and poorer, and Northern Cape must remain with critical minerals that they can use to empower their people, because no one will invest in an area where there is no rail networks to transport those raw minerals. Now, we don't know how to build an economy when you sell rail, how to build an economy when you sell your airline, how to build an economy when you sell your state-owned entities, how to build an economy when you are selling the most important tools and drivers of the economy for your people, which are created for the interest of our people. Now, Comrade SG was saying the NGC must come out hard against elders who want to disposition us from our birthright and our own economic activities. You must fearlessly come out hard, because you and me have no trust funds. Me and you have no offshore accounts in America and everywhere else. The only thing that we have is South Africa and African National Congress. We are saying to COSAS, the reason ministers and premiers and MMCs and those who are in business and NEC members of the ANC don't take their kids to public schools is because they don't believe in their own system. They've collapsed the public school system. They move their kids to private schools to protect them while they leave you to suffer there. We're saying, COSAS, you must make a call that any public servant, anyone deployed by the ANC, they must disclose where they're taking their kids to. If they are taking them to private schools, they must withdraw them immediately. How to tell people that you are giving them the best education, but what you love the most, which is your kids, you take them to a private education, which you are not giving to your kids. to the people of South Africa. The renewal of the ANC's agent, Comrade Zaman. All of this will not be achieved if the ANC is not renewed. I always say, every message depends on the integrity of the messenger. Now, if the messenger is in question, no one will follow the message. Now, at this point, the ANC is loved by the people, but the problem is that the messengers of elected, no one trusts them. Now, the ANC Youth League, we're calling upon you like the generation of 1944. Don't postpone the revolution of taking the ANC. We are the only messengers that people will trust. Anybody else will not be trusted. Because you are the only ones who have the integrity to defend our people. Because you live with our people, you eat with our people, you stay with them every day. You are the only ones who can totally liberate our people. You, as the Youth League, you are the only ones with the integrity to be the messenger of the African National Congress. No one else. No one else. Generations have proven that at different times they've played their role. They've played their role to liberate us. They've played their role. We honor them. We respect their wisdom. We love them. We thank them very much. But they must allow us to take the revolution moving forward. Thank you very much for liberating us, Comrade Lulu, and your generation and generation before. We'll always come for you for wisdom. But for leadership, we're taking charge. The ANC Youth League must reject politics of deferral. We must insist on economic injustice now. Not as a slogan, but as a material program. The land issue is at the center of our program. The nationalization of key sectors is on the center of our program. The removal of youth unemployment through state-led job guarantees is on the center of our program. The dismantling of the lead capture of both the party and our economy is at the center of our program. This task of our generation is to complete the National Democratic Revolution by grounding it as a class struggle, not a lead compromise. The road ahead demands courage, political clarity, and revolutionary honesty. We must either radicalize the state in the interest of the people or be failures. Radicalize the state in the interest of the people or be failures. We are the only ones, Comrade Zaman, who apologize for deploying comrades of the ANC to advance your own program. We are the only revolutionary party who apologize for deploying your own people to advance your program. How do you expect people who are anti the NTR to advance the NTR? When you deploy a DG who has not went through the OR Tambo school leadership, how do you expect a DG who believes in DA policies to advance NC policies? Why are we neutral? Why are we passive? The masses of our people of South Africa gave us a political responsibility and supported our program of the NTR. They never said become neutral. They said change our lives as they promised with the NTR. Move us to the National Democratic Society. Deploy your best who are conscientized, who understand the program of action of the NTR to lead us moving forward. You can't deploy Helen Zille to advance the NTR. I don't know how we're advancing the NTR at Home Affairs and other departments that are captured by liberals because of the setback we've got, because our voters have turned against us, and the ANC could not neglect the responsibility to lead. I will not speak much SG on the SACP. I'll leave that to you. I'm trying to move fast, DP. You'll receive the documents, comrades. I'm skipping some pages because I'm seeing time. The document also covers on the issues of local government, I'll give it for you to read. It also speaks on the issue of the failures of a strategy for the service of our people and political plan. It also speaks about drugs and substance abuse, which is killing our youth every day. And one of the biggest contributors is the high level of unemployment. Because our townships have become a holiday Monday to Monday. The youth have no activities or nothing to do. We've called upon the ANC as part of the solutions, Comrade Zamane, of resolving our socio-economic problems we're faced with. We've made a call to the African National Congress that it is urgent that we create economic corridors. What do we mean as the Youth League on economic corridors? We're saying that if in Mpumalanga and Limpopo they're dealing with agriculture in the Eastern Cape, every school in that area must have agriculture as a compulsory subject. We're saying, when we're saying economic corridors, we're saying the youth that have skill there, they must urgently enter into the nearest TVET colleges, because we believe that TVETs are the most important drivers of our own economy. We're saying that TVET colleges must not be colleges to teach HR and management and business management. Why are you studying business management at a TVET college when you must be studying subjects that respond to urgent economic demand of your own country? We're saying in the Eastern Cape, in Mpumalanga and Limpopo, for example, if there's agriculture, agri-processing factories must be stationed there. They must move from school, college to processing at Northern Cape as part of our industrialization program. It will assist us to move out of migrant workers, because people move orange from the Northern Cape to be processed in Gauteng when the youth here are unemployed. We're saying the issue of coal in Mpumalanga, it is not a joke. We can't be told by countries that have no coal that we must move away from our own coal. When coal drives important economic activities and towns in this country, when we have over 200 years of this coal, we are told by Western countries that have no coal, that is now polluting the country. We won't even contribute 5% of pollution as a continent. Now we're saying, hands off coal, hands off. Hands off coal, hands off. We must continue to utilize coal to produce energy. We have no problem with what you have created here, Comrade Zamane, of IPPs. They can only work here in the Western Cape, nowhere else. Northern Cape, nowhere else. Those IPPs are expensive. They are very heavy on government infrastructure. They are just moving. They are not doing what they're supposed to do. The same people who are saying that we must stay away from coal, when Russia imposed a blockage of gas to European countries, they're the first people to run to our harbors here, requesting that they want the coal to repurpose their own coal stations. The same dirty coal that is dirty for Africa is clean for them. We are not going to allow Western powers to dictate terms for Africa. We are a blessed nation. Those that went to meet Trump, asked them a lot of questions, paraded them. They were trying their level best, but they've seen that imperialists and white racists will never respect us. No matter what you do, they will always see you as their slave who must work for them, and they must take your minerals and utilize them to build their own economies. Our own minerals here in Africa are utilized to revive economies where there is no minerals. While where there is minerals, the economies are stopped. Our factories have turned into churches. Our factories have turned into informal settlements when our raw materials are reviving other economies, industrializing them. China, for example, what we call progressive, depends mainly on our raw materials here to revive their own industries. I am not sure if China supports our industrialization program, because if we industrialize here and keep our raw minerals here and produce our batteries here, it means China, people of China, will not have an active economy like the one they have, because their cars and everything else, their mineral resources are totally dependent on the raw materials below our soil in Africa. Now the debate we must have that if we have a blockage of export quotas, will we still have China as our ally? It's a very important debate Comrade Lungisa must have. But Tinama National, we put us first. South Africa first. We are not going to be exploited for other countries' interest at our expense. Our people can't starve while we have minerals for them to live. Comrades, it will be unfair and it will be wrong not to acknowledge the generation that officially launched the ANC Youth League in 1944. The generation that announced the program of action. The generation that gathered on this day, on the 10th of September 1944, at the Bantusman Social Center in Johannesburg. The generation that elected Anton Lembete as the president, Nelson Mandela as Secretary General, members of the National Executive Committee, the William Komos, Walter Sisulu, A.P. Mda, Robert Richa, Robert Sibuku, Oliver Tambo, the Mkolis and many others. And again, it will be wrong again, Comrade Lou Johnson, if I don't acknowledge the relaunching of the Youth League in Kwandebele, that generation in 1991. Because those are very important stages after the unpenning. The generation that elected Comrade Peter Mokaba as a president, Comrade Rapu as Secretary General, Comrade Lulu as Deputy President. That generation is also one of the most special generations that must acknowledge and also clap hands for. Because if it wasn't for those two generations, we would not have been carried here. It's a generation of young lions which were declared also by Oliver Tambo. The psycho generation, we had many other leaders, the likes of Bokasel Matale, Franz Mushala, Peter Mokaba, Alec Nchabelengi, and many other leaders. Taken Met, Obed Papela, Rose Sonto. Those are generations that kept the fire burning when the ANC was banned. The generation that liberated the people of South Africa. The current program, the first National Executive Committee of the ANC Youth League meeting of the 26th National Conference of the African National Congress Youth League, we undertook an assessment of South African social formations. Our analysis confirmed what many already feel, that the current crisis in society demands a decisive revolutionary response from the movement. We further observed the ANC in its present form. It is not forcing any meaningful internal, ideological, or organizational contestation ahead of 2027. This absence of internal dynamism could not be a mistake for unity of strength. It reflects a stagnant and a dangerous complacency in the face of deepening social and economic political contradictions. We must be honest. Some current ANC leaders lack ideological depth and moral integrity that requires for this new phase of struggle. That is required for this new phase of struggle. Even worse, some have normalized corruption, treated it as a feature, not a threat to governance. This undermines the moral authority of the movement. It distances the ANC from the masses it has formed to serve. For too long, we have assumed that everyone within the ANC shares the core values. For too long, we have assumed that everyone within the ANC shares the core values. This assumption is both dangerous and naive. This assumption, Comrade Lufefe, is very dangerous and naive. It has allowed opportunism, careerism, and counter-revolutionaries to operate within our ranks. For too long, we have assumed that everyone within the ANC shares the same core values. This assumption is both dangerous and naive. It has allowed opportunism, careerism, counter-revolutionaries to operate within our ranks, contributing directly to the erosion of public trust. Contributing directly to the erosion of public trust. I'm the one who needs water, not fumes. Oh. Cheers. Cheers. As the ANC Youth League, we have consistently raised warnings, including ahead of the recent national elections, that the persistence of this status quo would have devastating consequences. Our warnings were ignored. The election results confirmed our worst fears. Despite the recent setback and ongoing issues within the broader liberation movement, our commitment is unshaken. This is not the time for complacency. This is the time for urgent introspection, ideological renewal, and election of leadership collective that embodies the ANC foundation, the ANC founding mission to serve the people and to advance the struggle for economic liberation. The emergence of counter-revolution formations like the so-called Mkhonto weSisu represent a desperate bid for relevancy by expelled elements who no longer find legitimacy within the ANC. These individuals have not only stolen our name and symbol, but now attempt to exploit ethnic nationalism and tribal identity to divide our people. Leo counter-revolution is mobilizing, utilizing ethnic nationalism, tribal identity to divide our people. These political thieves masquerading as a revolution. These are the very same actors who presided over the state capture, who cut out public institutions, who now want to rewrite history to cleanse their hands. But the people know South Africans will not forget who betrayed them. At the hour of need, who stood firm to defend the democratic values. The ANC has always had the capacity for self-correction. The ANC youth will be its shaping instrument in this process. The ANC has always had capacity for self-correction. And the ANC Youth League will be its sharpest instrument in that process. The ANC Youth League will be its sharpest instrument in that process. I want to make that emphasis. We will not retreat from our responsibility. We will speak the truth to power, even when power wears familiar colors. We will speak the truth to power, even when power wears familiar colors. Even if you wear black, green, and gold t-shirts like us, when you are not us, we will tell you are not us. We will fight to ensure that economic freedom is not reduced to hollow phrases, but becomes a lived reality of millions. We owe this to the poor and the working class to end the problems we're faced with. And to end and fight this battle for generations to come. The other issues, provinces, if you allow me, is your provincial demands. I'm going to skip them. But you will have them as documents because we've requested, Comrade Lulu, for the first time that provinces must send their localized demands of their politics of their own province and to put them also in the political report. Gauteng submitted, Eastern Cape submitted, KZN submitted, Mpumalanga submitted, Limpopo submitted, Western Cape submitted, Northwest submitted, and the Free State submitted. They submitted and the Northern Cape submitted. I think I started with it was on top. My apologies to the host who might not have catering after this, at the rate we're going. They submitted their political demands. But I'll move straight to the national demands. As the Youth League nationally, we demand free quality education for all. We demand that the state clears all historic debts of graduates so they can access their qualification. We demand that there must be no blacklisting of students with debts to credit bureaus. We demand the expansion of NSAS to include funding postgrad students. We demand the introduction of online learning as an accessible option for support for libraries, Wi-Fi infrastructure. We demand the strengthening of TVET colleges as a response for economic demands. TVET colleges must not be a dumping area. It must be the first choice for the youth of this country. We demand that the president declares the unemployment of youth in this country a disaster. We demand a state of emergency on the unemployment of youth. Because if majority of your people are unemployed, that must be a state of emergency. It's worse than COVID-19. I always make this point that when you're unemployed, Comrade Zaman, Comrade Lungisa, Comrade Collen Maine, you have no dignity. An unemployed person is a dead person. If an unemployed youth, you are dead. Even the basis, Comrade William, you jola airtime or na o jola jwang os na airtime le data os na cheleta on sangwana. Now, even the basic rights given by the human rights that you must be active in, you can't participate in because you have no access to resources. Now, it's a state of emergency. And we demand a state-led industrialization and beneficiation of our minerals resources in this country. Introduction of export quotas to prioritize local beneficiation and protect domestic supplies and create jobs. Now we demand 7% export quotas. We demand a radical economic transformation to include youth-owned enterprises in key sectors. We demand access to land and support for agriculture. We demand that no foreigner must own spaza shops or local businesses. You can't move as far as Somalia to come and sell chappies. It is not xenophobic to say certain businesses must be set aside for South Africans. You are not an investor, Comrade Zamani. You are not an investor if you move from as far as Somalia to come and sell bread. That is not investment. South Africa can sell that bread. We demand the removal, urgent removal of all illegal foreigners. We welcome everyone in South Africa, but you must enter legally. You go through the border control, you are checked, you come in, we account for you. The dangers of illegal foreigners is that you can't account for them in the country. It is not only a security problem, Comrade Nzoza, it is also heavy on the health and education infrastructure. Because you must budget for people in the country. You must know every year how many schools you are building. Now, if you allow the corruption in your borders, Comrade Nzoza, and they come in illegally, they do crime here, they leave, you can't account for them. It's a security issue. We're saying urgently, South Africans are demanding the removal of illegal foreigners. They're demanding that the corruption at Home Affairs must end. I was worried when I saw Home Affairs at Jimiston bent down, and I saw you with IDs next door to Civic Center with Dr. Kagaza. I said, these IDs, Comrade President of SASCO, if they can be protected inside Home Affairs, I can imagine outside Home Affairs. The level of corruption that can happen when there's not even cameras there. Now I'm sure that Jimiston now is a center of corruption of selling of IDs because of the damage that was done by criminals. Now, Comrade Nzoza, we trust you there as our former SG that you'll give a report that we want that to be fixed. We're demanding that Treasury allocates funds immediately for unemployed healthcare workers. How to have unemployed doctors when you are saying that there is no enough, when you queue for so long in hospitals and clinics, then we are told that you have unemployed doctors and nurses. We are saying urgently Treasury must allocate funds for that. It's a right of South Africans. We must end the staff shortages in hospitals and clinics. These austerity measures, Google. How does a revolutionary organization deploy people who do austerity measures that affects their people? That treasury is anti-revolutionary. It's a counter-revolutionary institution to delay the National Democratic Revolution. There's nothing as counter-revolutionary as treasury. Even the ministers that are deployed there, they can't do anything because treasury is captured from elsewhere. The officials deployed in treasury, they are deployed there to delay the revolution. They cut budgets on education, they cut budgets on health, they cut budget on anything that has to do with resolving the socio-economic problems of our people. They don't tax the poor to serve, they don't tax the rich to serve the poor. They protect the rich at the expense of the poor. Now we have a treasury that is pro-rich, anti-poor. That can be the one under the ANC-led government. Comrade Finance, I hope here in the Northern Cape, you are not treasury that is anti-poor. Because if you are treasury that is anti-poor, it means you're on the wrong side of history. But I believe because you are deployed by the Youth League, you will not do that. We're calling upon the increase of social grants to match the cost of living. Until we have resolved the issue of inequalities in this country, until our people are still in poverty, we must make sure that we still tax the rich to serve the poor. We need a Robin Hood system until capital and the state forces the restructuring of the economy to reflect majority of South Africans. As long as majority are still poor, the government must take care of them until we structure the economy to reflect the demographics of the country, where majority of blacks are full participants in their own economy. We need a proper funding program to address teenage pregnancy and young mothers. It can't be that we're seeing on the news, but an 11-year-old is pregnant, a 12-year-old is pregnant, and no action is taken. We need programs to go and address those issues. Those old things of forcing young girls to marry old men by force must be the thing of the past. It can't happen under our democracy. We can't allow exploitation. We demand the removal of all DA ministers and deputy ministers who are undermining the National Democratic Revolution. All DA ministers and deputy ministers who are undermining the program of the National Democratic Revolution must all be removed with immediate effect. We demand action against corruption, particularly at Home Affairs. Unobhala wethu Youth League yahlukumezwa pha Home Affairs akwazi ukuphefumula. We demand transparency in government spending and prioritization of the poor and the working class. We demand a greater inclusion of young people in all leadership roles in government. A greater. It can be above 50%. We demand the support of student movements, COSAS and SASCO, as an important instrument for preparation of the youth in all sectors where they're representing. We demand the investment of youth, we demand investment in youth in sports, art and culture, and cultural development. Those are our demands. In conclusion, SG, I've skipped 30 pages. I've skipped them. Now, I've not fully followed the instructions, but I tried. I tried. Organization, in their true revolutionary sense, demand clarity of purpose, discipline of leadership, the willingness to serve without expectation of rewards. This must guide our work across all provinces, regions, and branches. A weak organization invites infiltration and opportunism. Without political education and intelligent democracy, we open the door to manipulation. This is why we must expose and reject practices that compromises the integrity of our structures, especially manipulation of congresses to secure factional advantages. It is a betrayal of the revolution when comrades take pride in defrauding organizational processes to serve narrow ambitions. It is betrayal of the revolution when comrades take pride in defrauding the organizational processes to serve narrow ambitions. Comrade Nsako, Comrade and Francisco and Junior, you must not take pride. The ANC Youth League must remain a disciplined, ideologically grounded, mass-based youth movement of the left. Our task is to mobilize young people behind the vision of the ANC while recklessly agitating them, while agitating for radical transformation in society. That means fighting for the rights and identity, the right and dignity of the poor that are excluded and forgotten. It means standing against exploitation and corruption and all forms of injustice. A revolutionary organization is not a career path. It is a political home for the committed, the selfless, and the courageous. Let us build an ANC Youth League that is feared by the enemy. Let us build the ANC Youth League that is feared by the enemy, trusted by the people, and respected by even those who are opposed to us. Let us build an ANC Youth League that is feared by the enemy, trusted by the people, respected by even those opposed to us. The time for playing politics with the future of this country is over. The time for playing politics with the future of this country is over. The revolution demands more, and we will rise to the occasion. The revolution demands more, and the ANC Youth League will rise to the occasion. Amandla, thank you very much.